All right, so let's have a quick look at our document here. I want to show you a couple of quick setups that we need to observe before we really delve into adding texture and color and any other assets to our image. So at this point, we have our flatting layer right here, and we have our line work layer up above, and our line work layer is set to multiply in our blend mode. Now I've put a lock on this. Once we've set this up, I don't really want to play around with it until maybe right at the end. And this goes with our flooding layer as well. Now what I've done with the flooding layer, notice this has kind of got a red colorization here. If we right click on this, we can actually add a color to this: red, orange, yellow, etc. This is great for our organization. I also have a visor on the back, which I can later drag and place on the front. But at this point, it's just going to be easier for behind, so I can focus in on the face and all that. Do this one last. So that's going to depend on your image. So adding glass to that. Now the cool thing with having this red here is in our layer option here, I can go to kind, and I can go down to color, and then select red, and that's going to bring up everything that's got that red colorization. So you can imagine we can have multiple layers, and it's going to bring up those with a red color or whichever color you have applied to that, which is a really handy little trick to learn. But I'm going to go back to kind, which has got all our layers. And this is basically how our flatting is going to work. We're going to jump to our wand tool over here on the left. Shortcut is W. Make sure you select the magic wand tool and not the quick selection tool. Our tolerance can be fairly low. I usually have it a bit more than, you don't really want it 1, but you definitely don't want it too high. If it's too high, it's just going to start selecting, huge amounts of stuff. So, the 20s thereabouts should be fine. The next thing I want to make sure is that anti-alias is unticked. What this means is that we're not going to get any sort of halfway colors. It's going to go right to the edge, to the border. Should have created our flats with anti-alias not ticked on. Nice big solid pixels. And also that selection tool, anti-alias unticked for this particular exercise. Continues, I'll get to in a second, and sample all layers we want unticked as well for the selection process. If we have sample all layers ticked on, it's going to see everything that's visible, including our line layer. And when we select that, we can see that it's taken that into effect. It's gone, great, okay, there's, these black lines are now being part of that, and that's not what we want. I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. So unticking that, select on there, and as you can see, that's what we want. We just want that big solid selection there. So make sure sample layers is not ticked on. Continuous is an interesting one. Continuous means that if I select on this green area, it's going to run until it hits the borders. I'm going to turn my line work off so we can see that. And that's pretty good. It's selected there. But what if I want to have lots of green areas of the same color in my flatting layer that I want to select? Well, if I untick continuous, it's going to ignore that border. It's just going to go, where's everything of that color green? So I click on there, and we can see it's now selected there, which is pretty good. So it's up to you. If you're doing, I want to affect everything that's got that, we can use that. I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. The other option as well is, we have continuous ticked on, is we can click in there, and if we want to select another area, we can hold down Shift, and we can see a little plus sign appears on our wand, and I can say, you know what, I also want this orange area, and maybe I want the hair, and maybe I want this shoulder pad over here, and it's going to select those areas. If we want to subtract one of these areas, we hold down Alt, and I can remove those as required. So we can jump back and forth and select and add selections, etc., etc. And that's really important. So typically the way the flatting layer works is make sure you're selected on the flatting copy because we do want to get a nice clean selection, anti-alias off, sample all layers off, continuous on or off depending on what you want. And then say I want to select this main helmet, I'm going to click on there. Great, there's my selection. At this point, you really want to lock your flatting layer. The last thing you want to do is be drawing or painting or doing anything to that and messing up your solid colors. This is going to be your lifeline to selecting. The last thing you want to do is grab your lasso and go to reselect again and again and again. Once it's done, it's done. And then we want to create a new layer. And from there, we can add, go to maybe our paint bucket and say, great, let's add a color to that. With the orange I've selected, just change that up to something a little bit different. Maybe go sort of a dark purple. And great, we filled that in. And marching ants are still there. I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. And that's now its own entity there. I'm moving it around, Control Z to bring it back. And that's great. Now, cool thing is we can jump in here and we can hit our effects panel and we can go stuff like, hey, you know what, let's add a gradient to that. And here's our gradient option. Of course, we can select different gradients. You can choose radial or linear. You can choose how they blend, which is really kind of nice. And we can also click in this and physically move this around. So, you know, really, really great control over this. And we may want to add another gradient. Anything with a plus here, you can add multiples of, or you can delete previous ones. I've got a few from previous setups, so I'm just going to delete those. And you can maybe add a color overlay. Kind of a small screen I'm working on, so it's having to move stuff around. And you may wish to select varying colors and just sort of play around with your blend modes and opacities for this. So if you are playing around with colors and gradients, remember if your opacity is full and you're set to normal, that's going to basically make any gradients just not really interactive. So you need to make sure that you set some sort of blend mode for these to work together correctly, so you can get the most optimal performance from these, and you can jump back and forth. And the cool thing with these is at any point we can go back and jump in. So if we look at our layers here, we can now see the effects here, and double clicking on these will bring up our panel. We can have got them all here, and of course we do have other things like patterns that we can drop in and create and really play around with, which is fun. And we can hide these or apply them as required. So really, really important. Now, what I will say is this, as I drop down for our effect, this can get really cluttered. Our flatting layer needs to be stuck down the bottom. We don't really want it on the top all the time because we're just going to, we're going to have to keep hiding it and bringing it back up. Our line work layer, we want up the top because this is going to be defining our layers. If we start, building stuff over the top, we're going to lose those layers. So, there's the purple part of the helmet that we placed on. Really need our line work on top. So you're going to have to keep on top of that. Make sure when you create new layers, your line work, let's rename this, is on top. Great. Now I'm going to show you a trick. It's going to be really important. This is going to get really cluttered, and we're going to be scrolling up and down trying to find a flatting layer. Extremely annoying. Instead, I'm going to show you another trick. And as usual, I usually declutter my screen. I'm just using layers at the moment, so that's the layers panel. Everything else I've closed down. What I'm going to get you to do is open up, go to Window, and go down to Paths, right? And open that up. Now, this may open up with a whole lot of other things, depending on the situation or how your system is. Just clear out everything. Just if there's colors, just rip everything off, close it down a little cross, keep paths up, and you may want to extend the base down. And we are going to use this to create a shortcut for our flatting, which is going to allow us to quickly grab particular areas. Not helpful if we've got a massive amount of areas for flatting, but like this one here, there's not that many colors. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Thereabouts. So about 12, and that's going to be nice and easy for us to have that. And by having these side by side, we can quickly use it. So let's show you how to set this up. I'm jump on my wand, shortcut W, and if I just delete this layer here. So we're back just to our flatting layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the area, get my marching ants, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this little circle with some 4 squares, make work path from selection in the path layer. And what this does is this turns the selection into a vector-based path. Now, we're not actually going to be using this as a vector-based path. We're still running on pixel-based stuff, but you can see there it is. It's create shape on there. Now, this is really important. As soon as we create this, what we want to do is double-click on this and rename it. If you don't rename it, we're going to run into some serious issues later on. So I'm going to call this helmet main, for example. It's up to you what your naming conventions are, but you do need to name them. And then I'm going to grab my wand, click on the next area, circle the squares, and let's call this earpiece, for example. Or just ear is fine. Select the next area, rename. Let's call this microphone. Oop, actually got a double click in there. Micro, and hit OK. And so on and so forth. So ultimately what you want to do is select each area using your wand tool from your flattening layer and create a new path for them. So let's just do one more for a demo and call this one shoulder right. And there they are there. So we can see the basic shapes. And what we're going to do for this is have this as our main selection. So I'm going to hit deselect. I'm going to unclick out of these. And in order to select these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the control key or the command key if you're on a Mac. And there's my helmet. If I want to select this helmet, sure, I can grab my wand and go to this area here. But what I'm going to do is go to this image area in my paths and hold that down and make sure you get the hand with the rectangle or the square around that. And great, I've got that selection now. I can create a new layer and I can do whatever's required. I can paint in there and do whatever I want. And it's going to be just within that selection. I can add my effects, add a pattern over the top of it, whatever's required. And there it is there. And I can go ahead and make multiples of this. Doesn't really matter. And we can layer upon layer. And if I want to select something else, you know what? Rather than tracking this down here, my flattening layer, clicking on that, and going, oh, I think that was red. I think it was that area there. All you simply do is just go, great, helmet main. There it is there. There's my earpiece. There's my microphone. There's my shoulder part. New layer, and there it is. So it's a nice little shortcut, and we really want to start looking at efficiencies when it comes to doing this kind of stuff. So I'm going to leave that there. Keep that in mind. Do save out your work from time to time, and make sure that you remember to use your paths and your layers correctly. Also, just really quickly as well, don't forget that you can also create little groups that you can place things in here. And as usual, right-clicking allows you to ungroup or delete areas and stuff like that. So we'll check out your right-click options for this. I'm going to delete those because they look dreadful. But this is going to be a fantastic way to quickly go in and select our areas super quick. Line on side next to it, so do check that out.